Welcome back to the program. I'm Desley Humphrey. This week, international negotiators have been in Egypt to try and help solve the country's leadership crisis, a month after the democratically elected Mohamed Morsi was deposed. But for millions of Egyptians, life goes on, and that includes its young people, who will soon be returning to schools and universities after the summer break. But for many, it's a bleak outlook. With more than 40% youth unemployment, education is often to blame. So, what is the education system doing wrong? That's a question I put to our panel of experts in the latest of our series of summer debates.
There's a huge mismatch between youth who are graduating from the school system and university system and what the private sector or the job market is looking for in terms of qualified employment. So you have a sense of frustration on both sides. Young people studying, working hard to get this certificate, where they find it's not guaranteeing them a job at the end of the day. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have a job market searching for qualified candidates, which they cannot find.
Okay, Dr. Zalouk.
The good news about our overall educational system today is there is an awareness that we have a challenge. There's a strong awareness that the country is in a situation of challenge. It needs to be an emergency mode for the whole country. And it starts with the head of state and all other government departments, as well as civil society and the whole community at large. One country that has actually done an emergency plan is Morocco, and they're moving quite well. I think we need to call it an emergency. We need to be aware that it's really an emergency to allow the kind of funding that it deserves, the kind of attention, the kind of vision, and also the ongoing lack of fatigue. I mean, it's not about doing patchwork, little bits of reform here and there. This should be an ongoing long haul for the next decade.
Nermeen, your view?
Our main problem in Egypt that everything depends on the Minister of Education, the person of the Minister of Education. If it's someone who is really keen about education, he will do something. If it's someone who is just having this post of this position, nothing might change. It cannot be like this anymore. We should have a strategic plan and work according to this strategic plan. And the strategic plan made by educationalists, experts in education, and by the whole country, because it concerns everyone.
It is a government issue initially when you look at budgets and
Exactly.
the investment. From my understanding, the government budget spend is less than 5% into the education
Correct.
system. Now, when we compare
Of
that
GDP.
of GDP, yeah. So when we compare that to the UAE, who is investing 22%, you mentioned Morocco, 26%
Yes.
of budget, India, 12% of
Yeah,
budget.
yeah.
It's significant when it comes down
Yes.
to less than 5%.
Yeah. And if we're going to say that this is our priority, this is a state priority, and therefore it should translate in the highest level of investment and the highest level of countrywide collaboration in a reform campaign.
Industry, Dina, is also an important player when it comes to investing in not only the future education of our students, but inspiring teachers, keeping them involved. How do you think industry can play a more significant role and not leaving it all up to government?
Yes, it is critical, because at the end of the day, you can't leave the future of your youth in the hands of only one institution. It's several stakeholders that have to be involved, and one of the main ones, the main employable stakeholder is someone like the private sector, and engaging them into the educational system, where they've conducted several assessments with CEOs across the Arab world and especially here in Egypt. And a main thing that kept on being stated is that there is such a focus on memorization within the schooling system. And what employers are actually looking for are 21st century learning skills. And soft skills per se, like communication skills, team working, ability to work in a team, leadership skills, and so on, which is absent. And so integrating this within the school system and integrating what the job market is actually looking for in qualified candidates.
Dr. Zalouk, we're going to jump in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to be a little controversial here, because I think education is a lot more about citizenship than just employability. And I think we are constantly on this track of, what does the private sector want? I think it's time we looked at what does our nation at large want? Who are the citizens that we want of the future? We're in a trajectory where we're heading for democracy, presumably. We need to educate our young people towards a democracy. We need to educate people to be good citizens. And I think, yes, private sector has to be part of the formula, but there are many other stakeholders.
I wonder if we can just touch on the topic of vocational education. How much of a focus is there put on that side of learning? Maybe Dr. Malik, you can kick off.
It's unfortunately the second poor cousin of formal education. It is of lower status, it is of very poor quality, and has been neglected for too long. And it's a class bouncing as well, because there's a filtering that happens at the end of basic ed, where those that haven't done so well, and normally those that don't do so well is because they haven't had private tutoring, they come from poor families, etc. So they end up going to technical and vocational ed. And unfortunately, there's no way back.
One of the problems of vocational system or education in Egypt is how society look at this kind of school. For them, it's inferior. It's not a good thing to be in such a school. So the attention and the care for those schools is really bad. And we have to make aptitude tests for the children who are joining vocational schools, because most of the time they don't like the sector they are in. So they have to do what they really like to do.
I guess that's a big problem with the stigma and classes and associating that with vocational education. But what about entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial spirit, the engine of economies?
Yeah.
Dina, you're heavily involved in this part of education.
Yes.
When do we need to start teaching children about the entrepreneurial spirit?
Yes, definitely as early as possible. And just to add on from the vocational to the public to the universities, entrepreneurship education is a change in cultural thought. It completely enables the student to think out of the box. The box will no longer exist anymore. So it's shifting their paradigms of thought. And whether you're teaching it at the vocational level, where, as Nermeen mentioned, there's a psychological sense of inferiority or that they're dropouts or so on. And when we go into these vocational schools and teach them about entrepreneurship, there's a tremendous sense of freedom has come onto them, that they can truly engage with something that they're interested in and produce something with their hands and know how to market it, how to sell it. They'll know the whole side of the whole business cycle from start to finish. And the same applies for the public schools and the universities. And at the university level, it's even more integral to teach entrepreneurship, because this is going to empower them to actually create their own job opportunities and not be stuck in this paradigm where, oh, I'm going to need, as we call it in Arabic, a wasta, or someone to lead me to a job. No, I can create my own economic opportunities because I can create my own business right out of university. And this is what entrepreneurship teaches young people today. It's to switch that paradigm of thought.
And for you, Dr. Zalik, the entrepreneurial spirit, I don't think that Egypt is lacking in that, because I see it as I walk down the streets. But is there a cultural kind of blindfold when it comes to assuming that you can automatically have entrepreneurial spirit, or it needs to be taught?
The best way to learn is to learn by being responsible for your learning, participating in your learning, and learning by doing, and learning with others, because it's a social undertaking. It's your learning with other people, in cooperation with other people, with your peers. But I would like to also say, quite clearly, because we've had too many arguments about how education produces unemployable young people, I would like to say that the market is dysfunctional. It's not all about education. It's about a market that is not offering sufficient opportunities for young people as well. And the market not necessarily giving the right signals to what they want out of schooling as well. So I think it's not all about, the education is a challenge, that's for sure, but I don't think you can put the whole onus on employability or lack of employability. I think once you open up your horizons to what young people can do beyond a private sector that absorbs 10% of young people, beyond a public sector that is defunct mostly, into something where young people can flourish together with others and do their own thing.